Hello, this is Douglas Rumbaugh, and in this video I want to show you how to set up calendar contacts and email in Pop! OS. So for the purposes of this video, I have stood up a temporary trial email account through my domain provider, Namecheap. So I have no idea about this particular email service that I am using. I don't actually use it, so don't take this as any sort of endorsement about the particular email system that I am using. Just wanted something to trial with, and I will be setting up and manually configuring Imap, SMTP, CalDAV, and CardDAV. So if you have something like Gmail, this will be a little bit easier, but this is kind of the manual way of doing it that should work across the board no matter what system you are using. So when we are looking at Pop! OS, we have the default applications that it comes with for this are going to be Geary, we have Calendar, and then we also have Contacts. However, we are actually not going to be configuring anything directly within Geary, Calendar, or Contacts. We are going to be configuring it within Gnome itself. So Gnome has a subsystem inside of it for handling synchronization of email, calendar, contacts sort of things that all of the Gnome applications hook into. So we need to configure that underlayer that manages this stuff, and then our applications will just pick up the stuff automatically. Now, the default way of doing this is, of course, going to be to use Gnome Online accounts. So if you just search online, it's one of the settings, and of course the search here does search for settings. And we can get to this thing where we can sign in to a variety of different kinds of online accounts. If you have a Gmail account or a Nextcloud or Microsoft or something like that, then this should set up and it will configure everything that it can configure. You won't necessarily get 100% functionality of every service out of this, but it is there and it should work for some things. To be honest with you, I have never tried any of these, so I'm not sure how well they work. What I'm going to do instead is configure Imap and SMTP. So this is where I'm going to plug in my email. So we'll go ahead and type this in and make sure I spell it right. XYZ. Okay. So here we go. We got to configure Imap. Imap is basically incoming. It's what allows you to access your mail. Now, generally speaking, when you plug in your email address, it's going to auto-populate imap dot whatever the domain was. If you are self-hosting, that might be okay. If you're using some other hosting provider, though, you will have to update this to whatever that hosting provider wants you to do. So you'll have to check with your email provider's documentation to figure out what to put here. Generally speaking, it's probably going to be imap dot and then the URL of the provider you're using. So in this case, it looks like we're looking at private email, imap.privateemail.com, and the username is probably going to be your full email address. And then the password is, of course, your password. Some email providers, like Fastmail, make you set up individual application passwords, in which case you'll have to do that. This email provider does no such thing. So forward that. And now for SMTP, this is for outgoing mail. Once again, it has saved my username and password, but it has, again, defaulted this to the wrong thing. So we'll adjust that to the correct thing. And there we go. So it is set up. Now we can test this by launching Geary. And as you can see, this Doug at douglasrumbaugh.xyz account is here in Geary, and it's set up and is working. One second. This is future Doug coming back in during editing because I realized I missed something. When you launch Geary for the first time, it's actually going to look something like this, where the panel here for your inbox and folders and stuff is compressed. One thing you will note is if you do the sensible thing and you put your mouse over the edge of this panel and try and expand it out this way to make it bigger, is it will not move. This is a limitation, as I understand it, of GTK itself, the library, the graphics library on which all of this stuff is developed, in that this column here, this panel, has a minimum width set, And because it has a minimum width set, you can't shrink it any further. So what you have to do is, if you want to make this bigger, the first thing you have to do is make this panel larger itself by going to this end of the panel and dragging it out like this. Then you can make the same panel smaller by going to this end and dragging it out like that. Okay, now back to your regularly scheduled program. So let's just test it. I'm going to send an email out and see if I can get it. So we're going to send to contact@douglasrumbaugh.com, which is my web contact email, and subject test, random garbage, send. And let's see if we actually get this email. Let's verify that it actually sent. So I'll go ahead and pull this thing up, and there it is. So there's the email I just sent. As you can see, I've actually done this a couple of times. So having configured email, next up, let's do calendar. Now, as we look here, you may notice that there is no way to configure calendar from online accounts. It's my understanding that CalDAV as an option here is on the roadmap for this stuff, but it's not here just yet. And as a result, we're going to have to do something else. We're going to have to configure it somewhere else. So if I launch the actual calendar app itself here and go to Manage Calendars, this is where you can add calendars within the calendar app. So I'll go ahead and add calendar. Now notice there's no way to add a CalDAV calendar to this thing. So I can create a local calendar just fine, or I can import a calendar file, but neither of these are going to get me CalDAV synchronization. So it says if your calendar belongs to an online account, which it does, you can add it through the online account settings, which just brings you back to here. So on first glance, it looks as though if you aren't using Gmail, you're kind of SOL as far as calendars are concerned. As luck would have it, though, that's not the case. You can, in fact, configure arbitrary CalDAV in that sublayer that handles all of this calendar and email synchronization. It's just that neither the default calendar app nor the online accounts panel gives you access to those settings. So we're going to have to use something else to do it. And that program is Evolution. So I already have it installed, but I'm going to just give you the command to install it anyway, in case you want to. There we go. Sudo apt-get install evolution. Should do the job for you. Now we actually do not need to keep this. Once we have everything configured to our liking, we can then uninstall evolution and everything will continue to work. We only need evolution because it provides the interface we need to configure the calendar synchronization. That's it. So having installed evolution, let's go ahead and launch it. Here we are. And as you can see, my douglasrumbaugh.xyz email account also shows up automatically in evolution. So by virtue of setting this up in the online accounts, it shows up for evolution as well as for Geary. In any case, let's go ahead and set up calendar first. So what you're going to want to do is click on the calendar tab, go up here to new, and add a new calendar. And now here under type, you'll see we have the option of selecting CalDAV, and now we can actually add our calendar. I'm going to force HTTPS. Always a good idea to do things securely when you can. And then in my case, I want to use dav.privateemail.com. And again, your username is going to be probably your email address. So once you plug all that stuff in, you can hit Find Calendars. And this is where you will need to enter your password. And it will connect to the server, search it, and find the calendars that your user account that you plugged in down here has access to. In my case, I just have this one, so we can go ahead and hit OK there. And then hit OK. And just like that, our calendar is set up. So now, if we hop on over here, you can see that I have some calendar events that are synchronized from the remote calendar here on my Gnome calendar app. So it handles the synchronization for you, and you can see here is the calendar right here, I believe. Yep, that's the one. Boop. Now that is something that happens unfortunately frequently with some of these GNOME applications, which is a crash. But here it is back up again. Evolution seems to be a lot more stable than calendar, contacts, and Geary. I will say that about evolution. So there we go. One thing to bear in mind is that sometimes it's hard to read the text because of the default color schemes, but you can change that. So if I go to manage calendars, here's my CalDAV calendar here. So I can click on that. And here you can change the color to something that's perhaps a little bit easier to read the text on. There you go. That's a little bit easier. So do be aware of that. You can change the colors. The default color selections that this thing has are not great. But just to prove that it synchronizes A-OK, I'm going to go ahead and let's create a new event here. Go ahead and add that. And let's delete this not important event here. And we can go ahead up here. Here's the web interface for my calendar. I'm going to force a synchronization. Just click Synchronize Calendars. And then we'll go over here and synchronize this thing. And there you go. The event here got deleted and my new event is created. So we do in fact have two-way synchronization between the calendar app and the CalDAV server. Let's do contacts next. And this is going to be the same story. We want evolution again for this because, again, the contacts app itself doesn't have a way to configure this. But we can go ahead to contacts, hit new, and in this case we want a new address book. CardDAV. Once again, we'll go to HTTPS, and in my case this is also dav.privateemail.com. And this configuration works exactly the same way as the calendar one does. So plug in your username, find it, plug in your password, it'll search it, pull up your address books, hit OK, and the calendar, or the contacts rather, is now set up and synchronized. So let's go ahead and launch my contacts app now. And we'll make sure that we are using my remote contacts book. There we go. And so here we have these contacts. Now I'm pretty sure that this is, I think, a confusing, or not perhaps confusing so much as it is annoying feature. It's difficult to tell which address book these people are in, because Jane Doe here is actually in my remote on my CardDAV. John Doe is actually local. He's not on my remote one. So they're intermixed, and it's not entirely obvious upon looking at it which source they're on. So let's go ahead and see if I can create a new contact here. As you can see, you can specify quite a bit of detail about your contact. I'll go ahead and do that. Add a person to my list of contacts. And they duplicated their email address for some reason. Theoretically, we have contacts selected, so maybe it will synchronize. Yeah, and there they are. So they just synchronized across. Personally, I don't use contacts very much, but that's the contacts app. Okay, and that's about all there is to it. So we have set up email, calendar, and contacts in Pop! OS, synchronized with a generic Imap, SMTP, CalDAV, and CardDAV server. So this process should pretty much work for most online email and calendar services. Won't work for Outlook, Microsoft Outlook, because Microsoft Calendar uses its own proprietary thing. And I think Google Calendars uses its own proprietary thing too, but as I understand it, this does support that calendar anyway. In general, though, I would advise you to stay away from proprietary formats wherever possible and just take advantage of something like Fastmail or whatever this private email thing is that I have as my test account here. No idea how this stuff works, what this is like. Just stood it up as a test, but hey, it's an option too. That'll be much more useful to you than just random proprietary crap. In any case, we now have this stuff configured, and we are ready to move on to the next steps of configuring Pop! OS. So I hope that you found this useful, and I will see you in the next episode where we're going to play around with some settings and getting input working a little differently, as well as getting our minimize button back. As you can see, we don't have a minimize button here. So I will see you in that one.